So in our last video, we had a little look at probabilities, just kind of generally. So looking at them as a number between 0 and 1, where something with probability 0 is totally unlikely, totally impossible, and something with probability 1 is certain to happen. Now we're going to look at things a bit more mathematically. Okay, so we're going to work out the probability of events where we can work out an exact number. Okay, where we're just not, where we're totally sure what that number is. So the probability of an event occurring is, now this looks a bit confusing, it's the number of favourable outcomes over the total number of outcomes. Okay, now an outcome is just something that can happen. Okay, so let's have a look at what this means for the examples. So for A, you get tails when you toss a coin. Well, in that case, the favourable outcome, that means like the good thing that happens, that's when you get a tails. Okay, now a coin's only got two sides, and only one of those sides is a tail. So there's only one way to get a tail, by throwing a tail. The total number of outcomes is 2. There's 2 things that can happen. You can either get heads or tails. So our probability is a half, okay? And we can write this as a decimal as well, okay, if we wanted. So on a calculator, you would do 1 divided by 2. I suppose, you know, you're going to do 1 divided by 2 anyway. I'm just going to make that 1.0. Okay, and divide this, 1 divided by 2, to get it as a decimal. So how many 2's going to 1? None. So that's 1 left over. How many 2's going to 10? 5, and we've got 0.5. You probably knew that half was 0.5 as a decimal. You roll a 3 on a die. Well, again, let's think about our formula, or let's just scroll back up so you can see the formula. So the number of favourable outcomes, so that's saying how many 3's are on the die? Just 1. And what's the total number of outcomes? It's 6, okay? So for this one, if we wanted to write it, now, I'm going to say now, you maybe don't need to write it as a decimal, okay? Read your question carefully. If it says what's the probability and doesn't say whether to give it as a fraction or a decimal, just leave it as a fraction, okay? But if it's asking for the probability as a decimal, you're going to need to do your divide, 1 divided by 6, okay? And you could probably do this on a calculator, but without a calculator, how many 6's go into 1? None. What's left over? 1. How many 6's go into 10? 1. What's left over? 4. How many 6's go into 40? 6 6's is 36. And 4 left over. Okay, so it's going to be 40 again. How many 6's in 40? 6, 4 left over. And we can see that this pattern is going to continue. So we've got 0.1666. But like I said, you might not need to do this, okay? And if you do have to do that, you might get a calculator to do it, so you might not need to do this, okay? Read your question carefully, okay? You roll a number bigger than 2 on a die. Well, how many numbers are there that's bigger than 2? Well, let me tell you, there's 4 of them, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So we've got 4 out of 6. Okay, so 4 out of 6, and remember whenever you've got a fraction and both numbers are in the same times table, you can simplify it. So these are both in the 2 times table. I'm going to write that as 2/3. Now this step, do you know how I said you maybe don't need to do that? You absolutely need to do this. You need to write that as 2/3. Don't leave it as 4/6. Okay, so we could work that as a decimal, but I've shown you how to do it now. I don't think we need to do it over and over. Okay, most of these will be fine to leave as fractions. If you pick a vowel, what's the probability you pick a vowel? If you pick a letter at random from mathematics, well, remember the vowels are A, E, I, O, U, so let's just count them carefully. There's A, E, A, and I. There's 4 of them. So 4 favourable outcomes, 4 good outcomes, out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 letters altogether. So 4 11ths. Okay, now part E. In a bag with 5 red balls and 3 green balls, what's the probability you pick a green ball at random? Well, how many green balls are there? 3. Out of how many balls altogether? Now it's really tempting to write 3 out of 5. But look, there's actually 8 balls altogether. There's 5 red ones and 3 green ones. So 8 altogether. And you can't simplify that fraction. They're not in any times tables together. So that's how you write fractions, probabilities exactly. Normally we would write them as fractions, but if you needed to write it as a decimal, all you do is top divided by bottom. Remember, every fraction is just a divide, okay? And then you can do your sum. You're probably going to need to make it like 3.000. Okay? Easy peasy.